the pro-death lobby, the pro-assisted suicide lobby is, they want every state in the union and DC to have assisted suicide. And so it's no surprise that they're going after Indiana. They probably think, well, if we can get Indiana, then that'll be a toehold to get other parts of the Midwest. I think people are waking up to the fact that this really is dangerous. You have, the disability groups are really aligned as opposing assisted suicide. And of course, a lot of doctors' groups are too.
That was Kevin Theriot from Alliance Defending Freedom. His organization is among those fighting against assisted suicide. Currently, assisted suicide, also known as medical aid in dying, is legal in 10 U.S. states and the District of Columbia. Indiana's efforts are part of the 2025 legislative calendar. Democrat Matt Pierce introduced the End of Life Option Act, which would allow people with a terminal illness to request medication to bring about their own death. The patient would self-administer the dosage. The End of Life Option Act also prohibits an insurer from denying payments of benefits under a life insurance policy based on a suicide clause if the death is the result of medical aid in dying. The Catholic Church strongly opposes assisted suicide. Bishop Mark Hageman from the Diocese of Saskatoon in Canada recently spoke out against euthanasia, saying in part, quote, "If we do not engage in calling each other to a greater and fuller humanity, we should then not be surprised at the larger deterioration of a culture of human care and respect." The Catechism of the Catholic Church says in part, quote, "Those whose lives are diminished or weakened deserve special respect. Sick or handicapped persons should be helped to lead lives as normal as possible." It also calls assisted suicide, quote, "morally unacceptable," adding, even if death is thought imminent, the ordinary care owed to a sick person cannot be legitimately interrupted. One Catholic author writing in the American Conservative asks if 2025 will be the year of assisted suicide, and the author of that piece joins us now. Nick Rowan is the managing editor of The Lamp magazine. Nick, great to be with you.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. In your article, you write that in the coming years, the movement to add the right to die in states across the U.S. will make gains. What makes you say that?
Well, it could make gains. The hope is that it doesn't. But it's it's a well-funded and it's an intelligent movement that attempts to work in states where the margins are narrow enough that it can get legislative wins. And so it's something to be aware of.
And your article mentions support for assisted suicide, particularly in New York. Can you tell us more about this push in the Empire State?
Yeah, it's a bill that gets brought up almost every year, and the movement there is slowly, pulling together a majority. They're not there yet. They don't have the governor, the Democratic governor's support, but they say that they're confident and that they're going to be able to pull it off. It's not the only state that is, that is working toward this. Recently, Maryland and Delaware both very narrowly struck down a push for assisted suicide bills in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and could you talk to us a little bit more about Delaware?
Yeah, sure. So last year, the assisted suicide bill in Delaware, which, these bills throughout the country are all basically the same bill, uh, landed on the governor's desk. It had been passed by both bodies of the state legislature, and the governor, John Carney, who is a Democrat, and he's out of office now. He refused to sign it. He looked at it and said, "Well, I'm Catholic, and also I believe that the first duty of a doctor is to heal, not to harm. So I can't sign this in good conscience." And he threw it back. Uh, and I mean, that's how close the bill came to passing in Delaware. The new governor this year uh, has said that if it landed on his desk, he would sign it. And
Okay,
the bill is up for contention again.
wow. And how have church leaders in the United States responded? And in your opinion, are faith leaders and lay people doing enough?
I think In general, they're doing a good job. This is a hard battle. Moral questions always are. And last year, there were 20 bills that came up in state legislatures, and none of them passed. And a good part of the reason for that is because, members of the church and, state level organizations have done a good job of informing people what assisted suicide really entails. The challenge, though, is that the other side of this debate uh, is very committed, is not going to give up, and will push until they can get assisted suicide legal in as many states as possible.
And can you tell us what the polling in the United States says on this issue, and can anything be done to turn those numbers around?
Well, I don't know. The polling is very interesting on this question. When you ask people, you know, bare question, should assisted suicide be legal? Should euthanasia be legal for people who are terminally ill? The majority of people will say yes. And then it gets more interesting when you start asking more questions about, for instance, do you think assisted suicide is moral? About 50% of people will still say yes, but 40%, which is a significant plurality, will say no, definitely not. And this is where the interesting debate is that people, generally speaking, in the abstract, think that you should be allowed to do whatever you want. But once you start asking more specific questions and adding in different considerations, then people start changing their minds. And so I think this is where the assisted suicide question will ultimately decide it, not on the 30,000-foot question of should people have freedom to end their lives, but on more specific questions of morality.
That's a great point. Nick Rowan, managing editor at The Lamp magazine, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.